Hello, Chris, and hello, everybody. Welcome to the last transmission. Hope everybody's good today. How are you, Chris?
Yes, very well, mate. Yes, very well. Time's flying again. Another Tuesday comes around, and it comes around real quick, as you know.
Absolutely. It's too quick.
I'll tell you what, Paul, is this a good point right at the beginning of the show to raise a point that you talked about maybe cutting back on one of the shows that you're doing?
Absolutely. It is a good point, and I was going to do it a little bit later, but it's all good. Well, prime example today, I've got guests lined up for Thursday. Great people, by the way. So, you know, everybody's got commitments and they've just had to knock it back. They can't do it. But I've already spent a couple of hours researching and getting questions for them. So it's just for the time being, I'm going to be cutting back on Thursdays. I'm not saying Thursdays won't come back, but we'll definitely be doing the Sundays, and I'll probably have to up to pay you guys back. I'll be upping the Sundays to 2 hours, all being well. But for the time being, I'll be cutting back on the Thursdays. Or alternatively, I don't want to just throw spanner in works here. If you think Thursday is a better slot for last transmission, if it worked for anybody, worked better for Chris, because we haven't really discussed that, Chris.
No.
You guys just let us know. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Chris. Appreciated. And we've got a brilliant guest tonight. I'm really looking forward to speaking with Jo Hickey-Hall. I don't know about you.
Yeah, well, we're always ones for sort of promising the audience things, and we're so busy between us that we can't always get this thing organized. And I know Joe's really busy. In fact, a lot of the guests that we contact are busy, so it's all fitting within each other's schedules. But yeah, should be a really good show tonight. I know a lot of people have been asking for Joe to come on.
So many people wanting to talk about the Fae. And these aren't fringe subjects, by the way. These are just as important as any genre in unexplained phenomena. They're probably the original unexplained phenomena, to be honest with you, in my opinion. So I'm just thrilled, and I'll just get this bit over with, if that makes sense. So Jo is researcher and creator of the Modern Day Fairy Sightings Podcast. Explorers encounters with otherworldly beings and all types of unexplained phenomena, primarily the Fae. So that should be absolutely brilliant. But before we bring Jo on, I'll just have a look at the count here, because we're going up to 100 people in chat. We've got Mike Disabled Welshman, Paranormal Visitors, which is Lee. Good to see you, Lee. I've got it right this week. Carl Dan, Jojo, Margaret Webster. Let's have a look. Dragonborn, nice to see you, Dragonborn. I know that that person will have some questions for Jo. Studio 211 Productions, Dixon. And, you know, I've just said a few names here because I'm limited with what we can see. Oh, Rick Bennett, Down Rowlands, and go on forever here. It's like a bingo game, guys, isn't it? But let's bring Jo in, Chris.
Okay. Hey,
hello,
Jo.
Hello.
Yeah. Great.
Nice to be with you.
Absolutely. We're really thrilled to be speaking to you tonight, and I'm sure there'll be no shortage of questions. And before we kind of jump into some of the more interesting things that you've been researching and looking into, and your own sighting, which your own experience, which I know you've talked about many times, but people still want to hear about it. Do you think there's been an increase in reports of the Fae? Do you think that's because people are becoming more sort of bold and wanting to talk about it, or do you think there's generally an increase in this on the whole?
There's definitely an increase on the whole, and I feel that hearing other people talk about these subjects enables more people to come forward. I think it's a case of that, once upon a time you wouldn't dare to say that you'd seen a fairy, at least say even 20 years ago, because you definitely get some very strange looks. And it's not to say that you wouldn't still now, because of course you would, in the kind of mainstream society. There's no doubt about that. However, in this kind of sphere of the unusual, the strange, the paranormal, even 20 years ago, to talk about fairies was definitely at the edges of what people were even would entertain. And that is changing. And, even, I tell you, here's an example, is that when I started this research in 2016, which originally was a Facebook page, it felt okay for people to kind of share privately in that group. When I moved to the podcast in 2020, it was always assumed that people would want to stay anonymous. And it was like that for the first few years. And about probably towards the end of 2023, I noticed that more and more people were saying, oh no, that's okay, I don't mind kind of coming on and having my name to this. Now that's a big sea change, because before people were even worried about just talking about it without their name being involved. So something shifting. You know, first it was just the odd one or two that didn't mind, and now for the vast majority they are willing to come on and speak to me face to face and have that, you know, that video out there for people to see. So yeah, it's been some shifts taking place for sure.
Which is brilliant.
Jo, can we start off with your encounter? Because I think it's an amazing encounter, and I think a lot of people. Actually, I was going to ask you about the popularity of your show, so I'll get a quick plug here for you. I believe that it's growing in popularity because a lot of people I know that are in, you know, ufological lore, if you like, and cryptids, if you like, they're really getting, like Paul said earlier, they're really getting into the Fae and the fairy and everything that you know that surrounds it. So are you seeing that a rise in popularity?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, most definitely. And I think this is it. You know, what we think is possible is expanding, and, you know, and it's becoming more within the realms of acceptability. So we're definitely seeing that. And also I think that because people are talking about these experiences, if you've got an ear attuned to the paranormal like you guys do, and your watchers and listeners do, when they start to hear about some of the phenomena, their ears prick up, because, you know, for instance, it might involve lights, or it might involve kind of strange buzzing noises, or it might involve a sense of kind of moving into some other space that's not this reality that we're usually, you know, that we're familiar with. And they start to think, well, hang on, this sounds very much like, you know, cryptid experiences, or UFO encounters, or alien encounters. And so I think that people are starting to recognize, right, so these experiences that people have when they have an encounter with a fairy, the phenomena they experience, that's very like what we're used to hearing from these other reported encounters. So I think that's why people are now kind of turning to these situations to see what we can learn from, you know, from the stories, the kind of stories that people come on Modern Fairy Sightings to talk about.
Sorry, Chris, go on.
Does that work both ways, Jo? Have you also looked into UFO stuff and cryptid stuff and other stuff and ghostly stuff as well?
Well, for sure. I mean, you know, finding out about Paul's work was fantastic, and that was through our, you know, very sadly departed Howard Hughes on the Unexplained. Oh, and I haven't spoken to you since then, Paul, have I? But it's absolute, you know, great loss. What a lovely man, and how much he did for, you know, the sphere that we're all in. And it was listening to Paul on his show, you know, my ears pricked up, particularly I think, Paul, well, you definitely talked about this huge, I guess it sounded a bit like what we would think of as a werewolf or something like that in the woods down in that valley where there was a lot of fungi that was still
the bioluminescent fungus.
Bioluminescence, that's the word I was looking for. So you know, hearing that encounter, it made me think of some of the encounters that I'd spoken to people about in the first season of Modern Fairy Sightings. And then also, I'm pretty sure, Paul, that you'd spoken about your experience, or it may have been when I read your truth proof book, because as soon as I heard about Paul's research, I bought the first truth proof, and reading about your story with this strange man, and I'm sure your viewers and listeners know about that, this kind of non-human being that
bringing down the light.
Bringing down the light. I always think about that when I think of you. And you know, I hear these stories too, people that seem to be human, that very very definitely in our bones we feel are not human, and they never seem to quite get it right. You know, that these kind of stories really pique my interest. So I've always been interested in mysterious unexplained phenomena, ever since I was a kid. And I was one of these, like us all, I'm sure, I had this sort of fascinating, I had a book called Fascinating Facts. I've never been able to track it down again, and I'd love to, but I adored that book. So I've never kind of specifically researched that area myself, but I'm always very interested in hearing about anything that is sent to me. If somebody sends something and says, have a listen to this, there's some kind of parallels here with what you're looking at. In our Discord, in our Patreon group, we've got a Discord, and a lot of the people in there are interested in both kind of UFO experiences, cryptid experiences, and they cross.
There's a bleed through. There's a massive bleed through. Yeah,
huge. Yeah. So I do get to listen to a lot, but I just so focused on the fairy sightings that I just don't get a chance to properly look at kind of what we might call alien visitations or UAP or UFO sightings. But yes, I do enjoy them too.
So to draw you back to your own sighting, you're not going to get away without telling us about it, your own experience.
Oh.
Only joking. Do you want to take us there, Jo? And then I've got a lot of questions, and I'm already seeing questions coming up in chat. I don't know if you've seen them, Chris, have you?
Yeah, I've got them. Yeah.
But there's a lot of listeners who won't be familiar with this, and those that are will still be thrilled to listen to it again.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, it's very simple, really. But at the time, I suppose, looking back on it, it's simple, and talking about it now is, I'd be more worried that I was kind of boring people with it, because I've spoken about it on my show and other people's shows. But at the time, talking about this was a massive, huge deal. And I only plucked up the courage to actually come public with this after, I think it was after the first season of my show. I definitely had maybe 6 or 7 of my own episodes out, and I thought, well, I'm talking to people about their experiences, and fair enough, they're staying anonymous, but if they're brave enough to talk about theirs, then I should really talk about mine. So it was in 2000, reckon it was 2007, because I'd met my husband in 2006. And I should say something that played a big significant factor in this was that I'd had a really big and profound healing experience in 2005, May 2005 that was, where it was like I went from experiencing the world in one way, and very much kind of, I talk about the perceptual filters that we walk through the world with, and all 3 of us will have a different perceptual filter, and I was seeing the world through a way in which I'd been socialized, as we all are as kids. What our parents are into, what religion we might be part of, or whether we have a religious whether we belong to a religion or not, the schools that we went to, our interests, our own experiences, and everything up to that date. And after this healing experience, I always say it was like somebody turned the light on, turned the switch on, and I was suddenly aware of more about this world. So that had happened. I'd come back into my life after this kind of healing workshop, and my whole life changed. I started hanging around with a whole new bunch of people. I met my husband that summer of October, it was, of 2006. So this is like a year later. And then in the 2007, he was coming over to visit me, because I lived in Jersey, born in Jersey. And we would go and have a nice outing together somewhere. So we'd gone to watch the sun go down on this particular occasion, and so we're getting to the part of our relationship where we're really in love, and I feel again that was another significant factor here. And at some point, and I know everyone will understand this when I say it, you have a sense that someone's looking at you. And I turned around, and further up from where we were sitting, and I'm going to say it was a matter of just meters away from us, maybe between 5 and 10 meters, I'm not sure, away, perhaps not as many as 10 meters. This small, 3.5 foot tall being was looking at me, and he was your archetypal Freudian, as in Brian Froud. I never know how to pronounce his name. The drawings, those little kind of gnomey beings. He had a hat. I can never remember what the hat was really like. There was a sense of him emanating green. He had layers of clothing on, which were quite kind of tatty but charming. And most of all, he had ancient wrinkled skin that was kind of wrinkle upon wrinkle, so that there was no kind of like flat pieces of skin, but just wrinkles all over his face. And he had quite a round, open face and nice kind of rounded features, and really sparkling eyes. And I can't remember what color they were. I don't know if they were blue or green, but I feel that they were blue or green. And his eyes were looking right into my eyes. And I was just struck in that moment, and just kind of, I guess, at the point where I'm starting to think, what am I seeing? What am I seeing? What's happening here? There was a sense of that, but I feel like that was kind of when I was on the way out of the experience, if you know what I mean. In that experience, when our gaze was held, just something really profound was taking place. And then I blinked or looked away or something, and he was gone. And I've heard people say since that it's that. I think it was when I was talking to Brother Richard, actually, in an episode around Christmas, that, this idea of, there was this idea that if you kind of managed to grab a leprechaun and held on, you could keep on to this leprechaun. It's a bit like that with vision.
Mm.
If you have them in your gaze, have them.
They're always with you.
They're there. Mm. And they can't. And speaking to people about their experiences, this seems to be the case that it's only when you lose eye contact that they can go. Right? There's something in that. I do believe there's something in that, because it really rings true with a lot of the people's experiences. So I didn't say anything to my husband. He's not really into anything like this. And it was kind of weird in the first throes of, romantic love and all of that kind of thing. And I honestly didn't know what he would make of that. But I think mostly I was still trying to get my head around what had just happened. And then we, at some point later, got up to walk back to the car, and by this time it's pitch black. There's no street lamps around or anything like that. This is in a kind of beauty spot. There's nothing around. You have to walk to the car park. And as we walked up towards the car, something in the long grass to our left was keeping pace with my husband, but there was nothing there. There was nobody there. And he got spooked, because he does get spooked, and he started to pick up pace. And then this started to pick up pace, but again, there was nothing there. We could hear it right next to us. And then he started running, and I started running, and I was laughing because I knew what was going on. And it wasn't a kind of creepy thing. I don't believe that it was trying to frighten us. It was actually, it was a mischievous kind of air. And funnily enough, I spoke to a woman in Jersey in the summer of 2023, because a friend from Jersey that I told at the time, she didn't believe it was possible that could have happened, right? But when I moved to Bristol, like 7 years after my experience, she contacted me and said, "You never guess what? This woman I know has seen something that sounds really similar to what you saw, and it's at the same place."
Wow.
So I went to meet that woman in 2023. I didn't know her. That interview, that discussion was recorded where we're sitting down chatting about what happened to her, and that is an episode on my podcast. What she described sounds like not just a similar being, but the same being. It was within just a few meters of where I saw him. And the vibe that she got off him, the kind of cheeky, vibe, she described him in the same way. He looked similar, everything. So now we're, that leads me to think, well, rather than the theory that we only see what we expect to see, which is a valid theory, given that, she saw, I think it's probably about 10 years difference from when she saw him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, because mine would have been 2007. No, maybe not quite 10 years, but there was a big gap anyway. And so the fact that we're two people we'd never met before, the fact that she saw something that sounds like what I saw, it's not, that would lead you to suggest that it's something about that place.
Something resident to that area. Yeah,
and that it's external to us, at least external enough to have its own presence there. It's present there without me being there. It was present there with her being there. So my feeling is it's about the land. It's not that far from a dolmen, and as we know, these are hotspots.
Yeah, and you made a good point there, and Chris probably picked up on it as well when you said you looked away or you did something and it had gone. That's once again, that's something else that's notable for all types of phenomena, isn't it?
Yeah.
I just looked away. I just wanted to get my camera, and when I looked again, it's gone.
Right.
It's interesting, Chris, isn't it?
Yeah, as you say, it's very similar to other strange encounters. Jo, how soon did you go back to that particular beauty spot, or did you avoid it at all?
No, that's a really good question. That's a really, really good question. I know that, so in the grand scheme of things, we were going back there a lot, not to kind of track anything down, but because we were going back for the dolmen more, to be honest, and then we would go back there and work with the trees. And I say we, this is not me and my husband. What happened afterwards was that I kind of mulled over this situation for weeks. And as I say, I mentioned it to this friend of mine who couldn't really quite get her head around it. But I felt like I wanted to talk to somebody about it. And I was taking my daughter to some riding lessons in just an old farm, sort of in the middle of nowhere. And I happened to have an antique shop on right next to the stable. And the guy in there, I knew that he was a witch, a wise man. I say that when, great honor that he was a witch. He was a great magical practitioner. But anyway, I didn't know him at the time, and I would go in there and we were kind of sussing each other out, and I plucked up the courage at some point to tell him about what I'd seen. And the long and the short of it is that we ended up working together. We got on really well, because when I told him what I'd seen, he said to me, "You're not the only one." So he knew of encounters there.
Yeah.
And we ended up we started to work together, and then it kind of turned into a working group with a few other people as well. So it was like sort of 5 of us to begin with. Now, this is somewhere that we would go and we would tune into the trees there. We would go and work in the dolmen. And I would go back there and work in the dolmen by myself as well, meditating, just kind of tuning in to see what that felt like. And we would go to that place too. So I would really struggle to say how long it was before I went back there. I really couldn't tell you, but I know that within a year, we had certainly been going back there a number of times. As I say, not to hunt anything down, not to specifically connect with that being. It's funny that, isn't it? Because you'd think, oh, well, go back there and see if it happens again. I never really kind of felt like that. It was something really beautiful that had happened. It was something really meaningful to me. And given all the other incredible sort of changes that had taken place in my life, I just felt like, wow, this was an opening, because of that experience. If I hadn't had that experience, I wouldn't have chatted to that guy. I wouldn't have started working in the magic group. And ultimately, you know, I had more experiences, you know, so other things were already happening. It's never like I was trying to chase that experience down, like to relive it or anything like that. But I do really feel grateful. And I think of this little green man very fondly. And I tell you what, the one thing I walked away with, there was the only one kind of surety that really rang true for me as I walked away from that, was that he wanted me to see him. That's all I could say. As the only sure thing I could say. I knew he wanted me to see him. Now, whether that was a kind of telepathic, you know, communication, or whether it was just something I felt very deeply in my soul, either way, I know that for sure, because that's the only thing that I walked away with. So given what I'm doing now, you know, it does make me wonder whether
it put you
happened.
on that path.
He put me on the path. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
isn't it?
were you doing any healing work before that in these places on the land? I mean,
no, no, I don't think so. I've always been interested in those places. When I used to visit dolmens a long time ago, before I was kind of into anything or started working with the land, I used to get a bit spooked. I remember taking my eldest daughter in her pram to another dolmen in the island and feeling like, oh no, I'm not sure I can stay here. So it didn't always feel like places that I'd want to go and spend time. No, I was very young then. But although I had been doing healing since about 1996, I first learnt Reiki in 1996, and then I learned the method that I use now, body mirror system, in 2005. That's when I had that big experience. And so, no, I wasn't going there purposefully to work with the land. However, afterwards, when we were working in the group, we were going not as healers, but as magical working group. We would hold rituals there, really deep, really real. We were a very tight working group. We all really trusted each other. And most of all, this guy was kind of like our guide, you know, in the group. He really knew his stuff. I mean, he'd been reading for decades and really, really knew his stuff. And so I was very lucky that I had him as a teacher. So we were kind of leaning into Otherworld and having some amazing experiences. And we would always work with the deep honor with the land. And we would always offer whatever we gained from the experience, we would offer that in honor to the land as part of what we were doing. Yeah.
Jo, if you could have another experience with the Fae, what would you want it to be like?
I would. That's really. I mean, I'm more kind of interested in seeing what arises rather than imposing anything. To be honest, having had the experiences that I've had, what can arise is much more, you know, glorious and like nothing you could have imagined anyway than what you could think up, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it almost feels like I wouldn't want to dictate what that would look like. I don't know. What about you? I'm curious to know what you would.
Do you know something? I wish I'd not asked it now, because I'm kind of perplexed, some as yourself, because we go to these locations and obviously we're up on those cliff tops and we're hoping to catch a glimpse of something. So many things presenting, So yeah, I shouldn't have asked the question because I don't know myself. And it's that random when it happens. I mean, you could probably go another 20, 30 years and it'll never repeat itself, will it? But something else will happen that will totally surprise you. So yeah, I don't know myself. All I know is when I go to these places, we're not after anything bad. We're hoping that we will experience something incredible. But I get the feeling that it won't happen when we want it to happen. It's always on its terms, whatever it may be. And I don't know about you, Chris. What do you? I'm putting it on Chris now.
We'll pass the buck.
Different perspectives, I suppose. But I don't know, Paul. Do you think there's an element of within you, and same for you, Jo, I suppose, not to sort of justify what you're doing now and justify the sightings.
No, you're going,
also, what I feel on behalf of the witnesses that I've interviewed over the last 15 years, there is something in you that I think you get past wanting to prove it to yourself, and I have anyway. I believe it. There's something out there clearly, and I've seen the odd thing, but I don't know, Paul. Do you think you're going up there on the cliff tops? And it's like
I know exactly where you go.
You know what I mean?
Well, look at the people in chat now. We're going on for 150 people in chat. I don't desperately need to get the evidence. I mean, Lynn is in chat, I think, and there's loads of people that are all as avidly interested in the subject as Chris, Jo, and myself. But it's when we're going out and investing time in these locations, it's not only the first-hand witness accounts, but it's brilliant to be able to bring a bit of validation to what we're looking into. Jo might get a first-hand account from someone that, and on heart, you hope when somebody's telling the truth. You're the same, Chris. I am, and I love sharing those bits of information. And when we go out there with cameras, we're not trying to catch something out. We're trying to say, look, this is real. You've gone past the point of, I believe in these things, because you've seen it. You don't need anybody's proof. You don't need my proof. But there's people sat in chat who are equally sat with that knowledge, but they're just not willing to put their heads above the parapet. And I can understand that as well. It's a big thing when you come out and you say I've seen essentially a fairy. I mean, you opened up tonight, Jo, you went, well, once upon a time. And as you were as you were talking, and I thought, well, there's a line from a fairy story, because that's what people perceived as the Fae, isn't it? Well, once upon a time, it should be in a book, like a children's book. But the reality is that these things are real. Probably jumped away from original question there, Chris. But I go out there trying to gather information, just like you do, Chris, just like Jo does, and then sharing it with the populace at large, because in my opinion, Jo wants more reports to just bring this out, not shout to newspapers or anything like that. Just wants to bring out the reality that these incredible experiences are very real.
Jo, are there certain markers within what Paul and I are doing at the moment when we're interviewing witnesses, and certainly some of the big ufologists now are we're looking for markers. We're looking at, particular bloodlines or family or trauma or all the common things. Are you doing the same with what you're doing?
Yeah. So for me, I think what really rings true and what really keeps me so looking forward to every single person that I chat to, it's about the sense of meaning that it brings to them, because always there is something, it brings some kind of meaning into their life in some way. I mean, in a lot of the earlier episodes, I would ask people what transitions took place in your life around this time, because as we know, often these go hand in hand with, like for me, I was going through a lot of life changes at the time. When you're moving through these kind of life thresholds, something opens up that makes it more possible for you to have these experiences. So I'd say that's a marker. For some other people, it's just a real sense of meaning, so that they feel more at peace with the world, or more at peace with themselves, or it's a relief to know that the mundane world is not all that there is. And knowing that now, that they can maybe just lean into living their life a little bit more. And often these experiences they're like initiation. It's like an initiation rite in some way, which, you know, I would add, and many other people have spoken about this too, including, I should say, Brother Richard, who, if you want to, you know, catch him anywhere, but definitely the episode I did with him, he talks a little about this, is that initiation rites that are still prevalent in other indigenous cultures around the world are missing from our society. And when these experiences happen in our modern Western society, it's often kind of like compelling you to step into or through something in your life. And when you do that, you experience life in a different way. And we're back to that kind of perceptual filter again, that beforehand you just thought the world was like, yeah, I do this, I do that, you know, I go to my work, you know, I have my family, you know, I live my life and blah, blah, blah. And I accept that this is what the world is like. It's just going to be like this. When you have this experience, suddenly it's like, oh, right, okay, well, if these kind of boundaries that have been placed over the world, over our experience or our, you know, what we're told that the world is like, if that is kind of blasted out, because it can feel like that when you've had an experience, if that's just blasted away, then what else is possible? And so, you know, for I'd say that's kind of another marker, as well as this sort of pushing through something and realizing, wow, okay, yeah, what else can I experience in my life now? And it might sometimes cause people to actually find their calling in life, to start a path that is more meaningful for them. So sometimes those sorts of things happen, and I have to say sometimes, most times, if not all. And that's the joy for me of hearing these experiences. And I guess this is how it's always been as well. Yeah, and I guess, you know, if you think back to the fairy tales and there being gifts and treasure from the fairies, sometimes it's like that. It's like your life improves immeasurably, not because it's like the flick of a switch, but more like you've had this experience and then there's a kind of opening into something about life being more joyful, being more meaningful, being more connected to the divine, which again is something missing in our modern Western society. Even in religious groups, the divine is not always something that we're allowed to have a direct relationship with. You know, it has to be through a figurehead of some kind. And these experiences are an invitation to have, you know, or an immediate experience with the divine. So I think this is the bigger question for me and the more interesting one.
Right. And are the bulk of the reports and the witness testimony that you get, are they all positive? Do you have any people who've had, let's say, bad experiences with encounters with the Fae? And is that a result of the actual beings, or is it more that the people involved have just not been acting appropriately?
There are really horrible experiences.
Like my phone.
That's all right. Do you need to get it?
No, I don't. I'm ignoring it. If it goes again, I'll turn it off. Sorry. Come on.
That's all right. Yeah. So yeah, there are more difficult experiences, and they're the ones that we hear less about. And it is likely because people do not want to look at that ever again. They don't want to face even talking about it for fear that whatever that was may come back into their lives. So that's one reason we might not hear so much about the bad experiences. So it's not to say that there are more good experiences than bad. It's just that we hear more about the good ones.
So Sorry, Jo. How about yourself then? Because I'm on the same page here. I just want to.
Oh yeah.
Have you heard of any experiences then that have changed or challenged your own, not beliefs, we've gone past belief, but your own thoughts on these Fae encounters?
Yeah, I got a bit of a telling off at one point, and I even kind of, what happened was, we are not meant to mention the names of beings. Now, there's a lot of the folklore that I don't necessarily see tying into the actual lived experiences. So there are taboos around saying thank you to fairies, for instance. That's a really big taboo. You should never say thank you. I have by mistake on occasion, and I don't think I think it's more the idea around that, I believe, is that if you say thank you, that somehow that they're indebted to you then, because it's like, because there's this kind of reciprocal thing going on if you say thank you. But so that's one I kind of hold lightly. I'm not sure about that. The other one is about iron. Some people say, well, they are repelled by iron, fairies dislike iron. And maybe that's true. But again, there are stories where iron may be involved in some way and it doesn't seem to have an effect. And the other taboo is about speaking the name of the being. Now, we hear this, again, back to fairy tales. Think of Rumpelstiltskin, of which there are versions through, there's lots of different versions of that through Europe and other places in the world. But the idea around that is that once you found out the fairy's name, Rumpelstiltskin, then you've got him, and it renders him powerless. Okay, so we kind of know that from fairy tales about that sort of taboo, and it's definitely one that we hear about with the other world as well, is not to name them, particularly fairies, not to name them. So one time I did say, so I had been connecting in, I always regularly connect in and ask if what I'm doing is allowed, acceptable. Am I going along the right path? Am I pissing anybody off? Because you don't want to piss off the fairies, of course. And this particular time, I'd had a name fairly recent to that, the only name I've ever been given, in fact. And I said it aloud, and immediately it was a really weird one, immediately from the television, because I was in the lounge with my little one, immediately from the television were the words, "Don't say that name," like in a really kind of, or "Don't say that," or "Don't say that name." I never remember what exact words were, but the feel of it was, there was no two ways about it. I got a real sense of what felt like dread in my body, just reverberated. And I knew in that moment, that had
consequences.
It had, yeah. So now I know. And that was a real felt experience, so I understand about that now. That's the only kind of bad experience I've had. I mean, I have felt the presence of unpleasant things, and luckily I was kind of trained a long time ago, sort of late teens, early 20s, a very useful clearing exercise. And so if myself, sometimes if you've booked an Airbnb somewhere, we've all gone this, I had this before, or you've stayed somewhere and you go in and it's not good and you just don't sleep, we're all, us lot, we're kind of sensitive. Your viewers and listeners will be the same. And there's something there. And so this technique that I use has, I bring that in and do some clearing. So I've had that before, quite a few times, in various times over the years. But I've never experienced anything frightening.
No.
Having said that, for somebody else, what I've experienced might be scary because they're not, you know, they have a different viewpoint on these things. But for me, it doesn't feel frightening.
Go on, Paul. Sorry.
No. It was just when you said the name and then you got some interaction or a voice from the TV. That in a way is frightening, and like I said, to some people, because it tells you that these things, this intelligence, this unknown other, is aware of everything that we're doing, and that's frightening.
Yeah, it's part of everything. It is. It's part of everything, and it will communicate however is possible in that moment.
Yeah, and it did.
You know, and it could be a myriad of ways, and in that moment. My kid had something on the television and I was standing next to the television. The television was at my left side. And it was just that immediate, like that, you know, millisecond, that comeback, immediate.
And it didn't relate to the TV program.
I've no idea what the TV program was.
No.
I couldn't tell you. But as soon as I'd uttered the words,
that came out
and got but more. And this is the thing with this research. There's a felt sense that comes with this that you can't quite put into words. But when I say it kind of reverberated through my body and a real sense of dread, I had got the message loud and clear.
Yeah.
That was, received.
What do you think, Chris?
Just wondering, any ideas, Jo, why you think that is? The reason for that, the name?
Well, because I guess, you know, going back to this sense of, in the fairy tales, the name having a resonance. I guess we all come into this world, you know, and our parents give us names. Some people say that we choose our names and kind of throw them up at our parents and hopefully they catch them and give us the name that we want. That's one way to look at it, that some people feel. But certainly your name, it encompasses, you know, a big part of your being. Knowing in the folklore, sometimes these beings go by many names. They have lots of different names, and maybe the idea of that is to kind of water down the essence, because I guess it could be something to do with it. In that world, the name itself brings forth the essence. I mean, if you think about when you're invoking, and you're using words to invoke a deity, a being, the words you use really matter. And actually, maybe we're a bit flippant with words in our society, and we have lost the real meaning and the real kind of understanding of the power of the name. In other cultures, the naming ceremonies are, you know, they make much more of a bigger deal out of that when you take on a name. Maybe we've kind of lost the sense of that somehow, but certainly it seems that in these worlds, name matters. I mean, I guess if you think about it, by using that name, I could have been invoking something there that was inappropriate to do that. So it's kind of a warning. I took it as a real warning that that's not acceptable.
Okay.
That's my best understanding of it, and I don't have the answers really.
Well, it's good enough. Your understanding there, you're as honest as you can be, Jo.
We've got a pile of questions for Jo.
You know, I'm glad you said that. I'm just looking at them now. I've got one from early doors. Do you want me to put it up, Chris?
Yeah, go on. Go for it.
Because it's one of the first ones, and apologies if I've missed any before. Jo, I see the Fae like the knick-knack, and I don't. How do you pronounce that? Figles, how do you pronounce it? Of Sir Terry Pratchett's books. How close was he?
What were they described as?
I'm glad I'm not the only one that doesn't know that. Do you know, Chris?
No idea.
I think they were kind of mischievous little characters. And I mean, talking to people, they seem to appear in different ways. So I think those were more like sort of impy type characters. And there are certainly lots of those. And if people want to listen to those, there are, I'm trying to think, there's an episode called The Puppets Are Coming For Me. So maybe your viewer could check that episode out and see if that kind of rings true for them. The kind of imp type characters do come up from time to time. For other people, they appear as, tall, dark guardians. In fact, I watched that episode that you made about people seeing dark human beings appearing in the landscape when you're out on one of your watches, Paul.
We're seeing them often.
Are they really tall, or are they just human size?
Everybody's tall to me. I'm only 5'6", but I think these things. Linny's in chat, and I actually know that one was seen on Monday night. I didn't see it, so I think we're looking at something about 6 foot tall.
Right. Yeah, interesting. So yeah, sometimes they appear as these very tall. We're talking sort of 7 foot plus 8 foot, maybe 9 foot beings.
Right. So Dragonborn's just described them now. They were fighting, drinking 18-inch tattooed kilt-wearing warriors who lived in mounds. Scotchmen.
Yeah, I mean, they could be. They appear in so many different ways. That's one way. I think they captured the essence of the fullness and mischievousness and the aliveness of them. And yet, some people describe these beautiful little beings that are kind of a little light one moment and then turn into these delicate little winged fairy like beings. You hear less about those, but they do.
Fairies that we'd expect to see in a book or a magical film. Yeah. More
like an old, fairy tale illustration or something like that. Sometimes people have said that they, as the person that you saw, that they look like people, but they're not quite. There's something not quite right about them, whether it's their eyes or their skin or the way that they conduct themselves, or.
Is that you? And I don't know if we all do this. Would that be you labeling everything towards the Fae? Do you think
it's a good question? Yeah, it's a good question, because I mean, I spoke to somebody on the podcast who, I think it was in the first series, he had come face to face with what sounds like a werewolf on a mountain. And he wasn't alone either. He had another guy. He had his friend with him, his best friend.
Chris, ignore that.
Okay. And
unprofessional. Go on, you're right.
He's a man. He's a man in demand, isn't he?
I'm not really, and I realise he's a man that's not thinking, because I could have just muted the mic. So sorry.
It's all right. Don't worry. Yeah, so I'm trying to think what the question was again. What was the question? Oh yeah, so the fella up on the mountain with the werewolf. So now, for me, I'm kind of bracketing that in with fairies, purely because for me that's kind of otherworldly, and whether it's a werewolf that appears there or a 3 foot green man that appears there, I want to know, like, what were the circumstances around that? what is it about that mountain? What were you doing on the mountain that night? What's your relationship with that mountain? You know, I want to hear about the phenomena of it. And so I kind of, my sense is to see it all as otherworld, and I'm calling it fairy because it's just a word I'm using to kind of as a catch-all. You could say otherworldly beings, and I think a lot of the time, I'm writing my book at the moment, and a lot of the time I describe, you know, otherworldly beings rather than fairies per se, because I think that there's a certain idea of what fairies, it's less and less, but there's a certain idea of what people expect fairies to look like.
Well, if Chris has not got a question, I've got one. I'll lob one up in a minute, Chris, when we've dealt with this one then.
Yeah, Steve Collins just like, evening, Joe. What's your opinion of the Wollaston Hall gnomes, please?
Right, so this is the Wollaston Hall in Nottingham, and me and my lovely friends and fellow colleagues, Kate Ray from Hare and the Hawthorn and Dr. Neil Rushton, fellow researcher, we did a couple of episodes of going up there and looking into this case. So it's a case close to my heart. What I will say is that, I mean, for starters, it's an incredibly interesting case because, you know, at the time, the head teacher had recorded these kids when they came in from school. I think it was after the holidays. They came in from school and they told the teachers what they had experienced in that park, in the hall. The grounds of the hall, which is the park. And they had been in a swampy area, and these beings had been kind of messing around in trees, again, that kind of cheeky, mischievous sort of thing. And they started playing with the children, and they arrived then in these cars, these what sound the description of kind of noddy cars, like bumper cars or whatever. And so these children were, for the large part, terrified, but also kind of laughing as well about it. And when they came into the school, as I say, the teacher recorded them. We've got the transcript. Simon Young did a brilliant episode on it as well, because he's looked into this case. So I'd urge people to check out Boggart and the Banshee podcast for the Wollaston episode. So my feeling of it, we went there and we had a good old mooch around, and eventually on this second trip we headed down to the kind of lowest part of the park where it was a bit more swampy, and we meditated. Now all of this is on that episode. It's a video of us on YouTube, and I really had a sense of somehow these worlds reaching out to those children. There was an idea that Simon was talking about, because he would have been the similar age to those kids, you know, from at that time. He said, why were they roaming around at that time of night, even back in 1979, which I think it was?
Yeah, it was.
That even then, to be roaming around a park at sort of after sundown would have been late for kids to be doing that. And the idea is that, you know, they might not have had, they were certainly running loose anyway. So my feeling personally, and I can't prove this, was that these worlds were reaching out to these kids. Other people would say they made the whole thing up. There's no proof. We don't know. Unfortunately, none of the children have come forward as adults to say, yeah, it was us and we made it up, or yeah, it was us and this is what happened. So we don't know. But I did go into the I can't remember what it's called, but underneath the Wollaston Hall is a little spring, and I can't remember the kind of spring it is, but it comes from the rock.
Okay.
Right, it's not coming from a flow of a river, and it actually comes from the rock. Is it Aquatius? I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, I perhaps naively dipped my hand in that water and put it on my chest, because when I'm in a sacred space, I like to connect with the place. I didn't really think about it. I did that, and oh my goodness, as I walked down the hall, something followed me down that hall, and it was right behind me. It was literally up against my back, and it really spooked me out. And I spoke to a woman who worked there for years, and she told me loads of stories of things that have gone on there. So the place itself is a hotspot. There's no two ways about that. I've got absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. I felt it myself, and I'm convinced from the other stories that it's some kind of hotspot. Whether what happened there was reported happened, we don't know.
There's some drawings as well, isn't there? The children did drawings of the gnomes. Yeah,
they did.
I only know this because we had a lady on a few weeks ago talking about it. And fascinating.
Who was that?
Maeve Calvert.
Oh, Maeve. So Maeve was intuitive, and she had actually gone there, and she tuned in as a different part of the park, but she tuned in and had her own experience. So that's great. Yeah,
Brilliant. Thank you. I've got another question here, Chris. Do you want to remove that one, please? Because I can't see that where I'm at with these questions. I'll put this one up. I think it'll go straight over at top.
Yeah.
That's it. Jo, a lot of researchers are now thinking the Fae are responsible for all of the phenomena, including UFOs, cryptids. What are your thoughts? Well, I know just before you start, I know I've said this particularly about the cryptids, and I value your thoughts and Chris's on this. If you're in a bit of woodland, ancient, beautiful piece of woodland where these elemental beings have resided, we don't know for how long, maybe thousands and thousands of years, and you go in there, you light a fire, you disrespect it, you leave your rubbish, you might use it as a toilet. Let's be real about it. So if these elemental beings are real, which we know they are, and they could present us other things, wouldn't it be sort of wise or thoughtful of them to present us something big, fur-covered and looking menacing to remove somebody from the woodland? Could you see the possibilities of that happening?
It's possible, for sure. I mean, these big beings appear anyway, whether somebody has disrespected a place or not. I think it's also possible that the place itself kind of manifests into a form, and I guess that's tying into what you're saying. They are showing their anger and displeasure at at whatever the person has done there to disrespect the land. So yeah, I mean, if we're using sort of categories of like the Fae and cryptids, but we could say again they're just all otherworldly beings, so appearing in different forms. But yeah, if we think about it as these forms being spirits of place, then they could take different forms for sure. But I don't think I don't think that the beings scare people because they're necessarily setting out to do that either. Right. Sometimes they just appear like that. It's very hard to pin down and start to, as soon as we start to sort of say, well, it must be like this and it must be like that, we've lost it, because the nature of these beings is that it's a very sort of opaque world, and that it's full of paradox. And as soon as you, like with the trickster, as soon as you try and pin it down and say, well, it's this way, it will appear in another way. So that's kind of the nature of these things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Dog Tanyon's asking, would leprechauns come under the same banner as fairies?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they would be what we have an idea of fairies, being like. I've never spoken to anyone that necessarily feels that they met a leprechaun, but it's just another name. And I mean, if you look at, in England, we have different names for fairies. For instance, we might have boggarts and brownies and, you know, elves and all sorts of different names. Somebody might call a being a gnome, whereas somebody else would call that same being a brownie, or, you know, a hobgoblin. Hobgoblins are usually in the house, but again, that's me trying to put things into categories. And I think for me, what I'm learning is that it's very, you can't quite categorize these beings. We're just using different names to make sense of them for us as human beings. You know,
how about place names then, Jo? Do you sometimes look at place names when you're driving around or going to different locations? I don't know, see Hob Lane or something like that. And do you think, I'm going to look into the history of that? Because very often there's some kind of connection to exactly what the name signifies.
Absolutely, yeah. And some places were named for, you know, for these beings. Or they might be a very beautiful valley, and people have always sensed the other world there, and so, you know, over time it gets given a name, you know, whatever. Or so you definitely get that. And if people are interested in that, look into Dr. Simon Young's work, because he did a whole study of particularly Northern England, actually, and particularly looking at the boggart, but he's looked into names in general too, about fairy place names all over the British Isles, places that are named after mermaids and what have you, and the name Hob and, you know, boggarts. So and a lot of his research journals are on academia.com, I think it is. It's academia something or other, and you can access them for free. So you can look into that, because you might find that there's some in your local area.
When you said Northern England, you know, there is a lot of connections to particularly folklore, not necessarily what people would just term as the Fae, but in East and North Yorkshire, it's there, you know, definitely.
Yeah. They hung on to it, didn't they? Better than we, you know. I think as soon as you get people moving to cities, and kind of chasing modernization, they always think they know better, don't they? And I think that more like the places that would have stayed more like rural communities, if you look at Ireland, for instance, they hung on to a lot of their folklore and meaning of these beings and the places where they might reside.
Yeah.
More reverence. Yeah.
Jo, on last week's show, I'd been watching something, I can't remember the show now, but it talked about a perceived a contract or an agreement between humans and the Fae. Are you aware of anything like that, and the reason that contract or agreement was sort of, I don't know, they just got rid of it? I think it's alleged that the human side of the party, no surprise, did something to sort of destroy that relationship. Do you know anything about that?
Not specifically, but I think that it makes sense in terms of, we've really messed things up, haven't we? I mean, if we look around, I try not to get on my soapbox about this because I can get so annoyed about this. But, you know, I don't know if you notice on your street, but when you walk past people's houses, and more, we've just got concreted drives, we've got, you know, that artificial grass. We're concreting over these beautiful natural environments. We are allowing developers to ride roughshod over any kind of planning restrictions that we ever had in place, and we are just completely disrespecting this world at, you know, just at the deepest and most atrocious levels. And we have broken our contract. We have severely messed things up, for sure. And I think that what we're being called now to is reawaken and to do something about it. And for each of us, that will be something different. And so I think there's some kind of reparation going on, in that we are waking up to what we've done, or at least many are. It's why we're having conversations like this. It's raising the awareness of these other worlds, and that coming to terms with, I think we sort of lord it about as human beings, and over the natural environment, over animals, and we don't seem to answer to anybody but ourselves, and that is not the way we need to be living. And so I think that in that respect we have severely broken the contract, which I would believe is to be custodians of this world, and to take care of each other, to take care of the beautiful environment, which gives us everything we need, and yet seems to be privatized by the minute.
Exploited.
Exploited, down to everything, down to every last bit.
Do you think that in order, and I'm not necessarily meaning the Fae as in some little being in front of us, but do you think to be in touch with nature, and we've got to actually go back to the real and disregard mobile phones and all the tech that's just clogging our minds up and disconnecting us from the earth and reality? Do you think we've more chance of having some kind of experience? I'm answering my own question, I think, because that's how I think. If we were going to have some kind of experience, then we've got to separate from all of that and get back to nature and the real earth and connect with that.
Yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? Because we are here with all the tech, and this is how we're being able to speak tonight, and this is how I'm able to speak to people about their experiences. And without that, we may not be able to have this conversation tonight. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, isn't it? And
I realized as I was saying it, that's what
hard.
we're doing now. Yeah.
But having said that, for me, there's kind of multi ways to look at this, because it was only in lockdown that I was able to use my garden at lunchtime, because I wasn't going into uni where I was working, and I could sit and meditate. And it was only through meditation that I got the idea about the podcast. Okay. And so that giving myself that space and going, walking in nature and what have you, which brings us a lot of, it really aids with well-being, so that we can receive the messages. For me, in that particular instance, it was about doing a podcast. For all of us, it will be a sense of what we could be doing with our lives that might be more helpful to the world, more aligned with, I believe we've all come here with, a path to something to be doing in this world at this time that's important, particularly in this big shift we're going through. So when we slow down and we are in nature, and it could literally just be being on the bench in your local park. For others, it will be taking themselves off hiking somewhere. For others, it might be if they're lucky enough to have a garden, or even just have a plant in their home to connect in some way with that plant. So there's that. Okay, that's another way to look at it, that yes, we need to put our tech aside and get back to having our bare feet on the ground and walking in nature. Now, there's another way to look at it, is that if we are, some people say we're kind of programmed by all the things that we've watched on TV, look at on our phones, and that we are shaped by that. We're pushed in a certain direction, our belief systems, according to what we see, what our feed is on our screens. But what I see happening is that it's often subverted. And this is what the other world does. This is what the kind of trickster element does. It will turn something on its head. So even if there was, say, a malevolent force in the world that was trying to get us away from, recognizing how important our natural resources are, recognizing how free we are to live the lives that the way that we want to, and more aligned with our path. Even if there were forces directing us to be more addicted to our phones, the opposite happens, because these worlds are always going to come through, and they're much more powerful than any kind of powerful systems that might be in place to draw us away from the divine beings that we are. Is this making sense? I hope so. So even in those circumstances where we are living the lives that we're living now, it will always get through. I believe the message will always come through if we're open to it. So I think that, yes, we have to measure what we're doing with our tech. And I, for one, have been looking at, using a dumb phone rather than a smartphone, so that I'm not surrounded by, having the phone on me all the time. I think that is a much more healthy way to live, and that is definitely a life goal. And at the same time, it's very difficult to just kind of like move away from it, because we're so dependent on it. So I think we can, as I say, kind of trust our trip in that, and start moving towards what feels meaningful for us. And I would say also, the good thing about phones and internet and all of that is that we can meet like-minded people online. So, in my group, in the Patreon group, there are people all over the world, and we come together and we're a real community. It's the same with what you're doing, Paul and Chris. You've got a thing going on tonight, as you do every week, and you've got people that can join together and feel part of something, and it feels meaningful. So there are these really great ways in which we can use the tech, and it brings us closer together.
You're spot on. I mean, Chris will agree, and yourself. Without the people participating in chat now, and the people that are going to watch this afterwards, there's no point in doing it. It's to get it out there, to show the reality of all this, and encourage other people to come forward. And this is part of passion for doing these kind of shows and talking on them myself as well. Chris, is there any more questions? Or
yes, piles. Yeah.
All right. Sorry.
No, it's all right. Let's have a look. Interesting question from Rick Bennett. Rick saying, Jo, how would you describe what the Fae is to someone that is new to the concept, asking for a friend?
That's a really big question, isn't it? What the Fae is. I guess, well, I would definitely use the words otherworldly beings, because I think that's a really good descriptive word, title or description, because they are beings that are, we see them in different forms, but we know that they are not the kind of human beings that we're used to. They don't look like human beings, or there's something about them that seems different, at the very least. I think that they seem to, I feel anyway, they seem to be some kind of something to do with the divine nature of this universe. Whether or not they are from this earth, we're not sure. They could be part of this earth. They could be the beings that are, part of the landscape, or they could be from a parallel universe that we can't see, that somehow sometimes crosses with ours, or that we are able to step into their realm and they are able to step into our realm. I think that we can't know for sure. We can't define for me, we can't really kind of define them, but I would always say go and listen to what people, what people's experiences are. And I think what tends to happen when people do that is that there are some stories where they kind of lean into it and say, oh yeah, that kind of rings a bell, like that reminds me of weird dreams I had when I was a kid, or oh, that kind of reminds me of I had this imaginary friend when I was a kid. Or sometimes there's no reason why, but we'll hear someone's story and it just rings a bell. And it's not even as if we could tie it to a memory or give a reason why it rings a bell, but it just rings true. And I think you were saying at the beginning, Paul, you hope all the people that you're speaking to, you can only hope that they're telling the truth.
That's all we can do.
Something like that. And I think there's something about hearing someone's story where you know that they are speaking their truth. It doesn't even have to be about fairies, it could be about anything.
Yeah.
But you can really feel it when they are. And so that's always compelling. And yeah, I think I would just say, if you're interested, start wherever you're led to start, whether it's listening to the people on my podcast or picking up a book that you might go into a charity shop and find a book on fairies. We'll start with that then. Just, start wherever feels right.
Before Chris goes to another question, that might be a good point then, Jo, we can see Modern Fairy Sightings Podcast. Where else can people get in touch with you and find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so YouTube, I've got the Modern Fairy Sightings podcast there, and then it is also on Spotify and Apple and all the other places where people get their podcasts. There's also videos now on Spotify, a bit like YouTube. And I have my Discord group. I have my Patreon group, I should say. So that's a supporters group. It's £5 a month, and they're just a really lovely bunch of people. I told them I was going to be coming here tonight, so I don't know if any of them are watching, but hello if you are watching. And yeah, we just get to kind of chat to each other about anything, to be honest. Half the time we're just talking about what we've seen in our garden and sharing our artworks and photographs of beautiful places we're walking, things like that. And then sometimes we're talking about what it feels like to have seen something otherworldly or experienced something that we couldn't explain. So that's always lovely. So yeah, that's on Patreon. And then if you go to Patreon and put Modern Fairy Sightings, you'll find it. I'm on Instagram. I'm hardly ever on Instagram because I'm just so busy trying to keep up with producing the podcast episodes that I just don't have time for social media a lot of the time. But I am on there. I'm on there more than I am Twitter. I think I've pretty much given up with Twitter now for a long time. And of course, you can write to me at scarletofthefae@gmail.com. Scarlet with 2 T's and Fae as in Fae.
Is it all lowercase?
It's all lowercase, scarletofthefae@gmail.com. And I've also got a website, which is scarletofthefae.com. So same spelling.
Yeah, I know Jo asked in chat how she could contact you.
I do have the website, but again, I'm so behind with uploading the episodes there. So I will always upload them to YouTube first, usually. Well, I upload them to Patreon first. So they're usually with my Patreon community for at least a week before they go public. And they get the full episodes as well, because often what I post to YouTube is like a shortened version.
Okay.
And then I always upload the episodes to the general podcast app thing.
Thank you. And for ourselves, Chris, we'd just like to say, what is it? Like and subscribe. If you're enjoying this podcast tonight and you're enjoying other episodes from the last transmission, please show us a little bit of support. Like and subscribe, please. And the same for the Truth Proof podcast. Always appreciated. You got to add to that, Chris?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good sign that the three of us are so busy, because it's a sign of that we're doing something right and heading in the right direction. And really going back to Rick's question there, really, I think you can apply that to any of the phenomena. How would you describe it to someone that isn't aware of it? Or you can talk about demons, you can talk about alleged ETs, if you want to call them that, talk about the jinn. How would you describe it? And by the time you've finished describing it, if you can finish, you're kind of back where you started again, and you're bleeding into other elements of this. So I think what we can all agree on is that these topics seem to. Is there an element that it's trying to evolve us consciously? There's I know that some people talk about that, and that it's pushing, and that without darkness you can't have light, and the balance and all this. And it's some people say it's a very what's the word? It's a very love and light way of looking at the bigger picture. But I think just a bit of balance is required. Anyway, I better stop waffling because we've got so many questions. Anyway, next question. So, Debbie Shaw, I've had so many that's happened to me moments listening to Jo's podcast. I've listened to them all over and over. Have you thought of putting a book together, Jo?
Oh, thank you, Debbie. I am writing a book at the moment. Debbie isn't a plant, by the way. I have to say that is Debbie's genuine question, but I'm glad you asked that, because I am writing a book, which is partly why I'm so busy as well. It's just really, really hard. Paul, I take my hat off to you for I mean, you are such a prolific producer of books, and so I am writing when I can carve out time from podcast and Patreon and family, and I'm also training as a psychotherapist, as I was telling you at the beginning. It's a bit mad. So yes, it's nearly finished. The deadline keeps being put back, but I believe now it's because it's just taking me so long to write it, and also because it has to fit in with Watkins. They have like a sort of a line of things they need to release and what have you. So I believe it's going to now be released next autumn. So yeah, that's but it may, if I finish it sooner myself and it can go through the usual kind of editing processes, then it may be out sooner. But it's running alongside the podcast, so it will feature a lot of the encounters that we discover in the podcast, but more as well. And I talk also about my own experiences as a child, and if that makes the edit, and my thoughts and feelings on all of this, what I feel is kind of going on. And it will also give a few suggestions for what we can do to sort of lean into, as Chris was talking about there, about how these experiences and these beings may be helping us to evolve, and as humanity to evolve, both as individuals and kind of group consciousness. And so it talks about that as well. So there's kind of a lot of ground that I cover in the book.
Brilliant, thank you.
Yeah.
Mike did the Sable Welshman. Jo, has your husband ever had a fairy sighting?
Well, he hasn't had a fairy sighting, but he was obviously there when the whatever it was walked through the long grass, and so he fully admits how spooky that was for him. But he did have an experience once where, so he's from London, and he lived up near Shooters Hill, and years before I met him, he said he was walking there one night and he saw a man dressed in like ancient clothing, and he looked kind of dirty and sort of sorry, there's the cat going out there, and he didn't look as if he was from modern times. And he was walking a dog. on a string or a rope or something. It was all just off, and he got a really weird feeling about it. And that guy was walking down Shooters Hill, which is a very ancient place, and it's where Henry VIII used to go hunting, which is why it's called Shooters Hill. And even before then, there are tumuli all over that hill, because further up, where we used to kind of go walking up there, there's just kind of tumuli dotted around, and one of them is just next to somebody's house, and I believe they were all in people's gardens up there, and they just got mowed. They just got mowed down and made into, you know, houses on them, gardens on them, and so it is a special place. So that was his only spooky experience, but he's so, you know, level-headed and down to earth, but which is a good thing, because otherwise I think, you know, we'd both be floating off. He's helping me ground.
I know that Chris wants to get through some questions, because I'm thinking, when you talked about that, did he think it was some kind of time slip? Because I was going to take you to Dartmoor then, and I think you experienced some kind of time slip, did you? In 2022, were you with Claire Casely?
Oh, that was it was an EVP.
Right, okay.
Is that what you meant?
It must be. I'm referring to Claire's questions, and she wrote it out. I was walking and talking with Jo Hickey-Hall, Dartmoor, and it said some kind of time slip.
Oh.
I've thrown you, Chris, questions.
Oh, Claire, you need to come back and let me know what you mean there. I think so is that Claire watching now?
I've no idea. I was looking at your questions earlier, because you've been on Truth Proof, and I thought, that's interesting. Time slip. We'll have a look at that, but I think we'll get through the questions instead, because I've just thrown a bit of a curveball there.
Well, we did. Oh God, I hope I'm not forgetting something important.
No, I don't think you are. But
every time I think of, because I had a lovely time walking with Claire in Dartmoor. Of course, she's from Dartmoor, and she's another fellow fairy researcher, and she's writing a book at the moment as well on pixies of Devon pixies, I believe, or Dartmoor pixies, but that's going to be out soon. But so she and I were walking, and she recorded our interview, and when we listened back, there was a woman talking or singing in the background, so that was really odd. And if you go to her podcast, which I think should still be on YouTube, I think she revealed that on the podcast.
We've got something there then. Thank you.
So
go on then, Chris. Thank you, Claire.
Ian McFadden. Jo, should you leave gifts to keep in the good books?
Yeah, I do. And rather than kind of, because sometimes, you know, we feel like we're doing it to placate them in some way, or, you know, and I guess, you know, you can do that, of course. I will leave, if we've made a cake at home, because they seem to love homemade cake. They seem to love butter. I really got the sense with butter. And if it's local butter, all the better, wherever you are. Local honey, something that is of meaning to you. So I'm part of a Druid Grove. I go to Stanton Drew on the, you know, the quarters and cross quarters. So the solstices and, you know, all the turns of the wheel. And when I come back, and if I've worn a crown of flowers, for instance, I will offer the flowers to a place in my garden. Or, yeah, if I've made something, you know, I will offer that. Sometimes it doesn't have to be a gift. And I should say, actually, when we're leaving gifts, please, people, don't leave in plastic of any kind. Something organic, so something that you're going to leave there for, you know, even if it's a piece of cake, it will get eaten by the wildlife, but the offering, the essence, will be received by the other world, and that's the important thing.
You've just took away what I was going to say. I was going to say, is this purely symbolic and not a nutritional offering? as such. It's just a symbolic offering that you're leaving.
I'd say it's even more than symbolic. It's even more than symbolic because you are offering something real, which is the essence of something. Now, in our world, we see the physical as the main. You know, it's either there or it's not there, right? I can see a piece of cake there. That's a real thing. But we don't think about the kind of the essence of something.
Okay.
You know, we can understand it we all have an energetic quality to us. If somebody walks in the room and they're really angry and, you know, we feel it. They might not say anything and they might be completely poker face, but we can feel that that person is really unhappy. So I'm saying, like, the essence of something, if we've made that with love, we've made that cake with love, and we take it out and we give it in honor and, you know, we give thanks in some way, then they are receiving that energetic quality of what is given. So, and it can be symbolic as well, because, say, for instance, you could literally create a symbol and offer that in some honor to them. People always think it has to be something physical that you can hold in your hand. You could offer a song or a poem or a chant. And I find that those are really well received. So if you've written your own song, for instance, and of course, musicians are always very popular, and artists are always very popular with the other world. If you're creating something, it's almost like, well, I believe we don't just have an idea and then go and sit and write it down. It can feel like that, but I feel like we're tapping into something very deep within ourselves. We're tapping into the divine within us, right? So if we're tapping into the divine within us and bringing something forth into this world, whether it be a painting or a poem or whatever, then we're kind of receiving the divine, producing it and giving it back to the divine. And that those kind of offerings are really well received. So go along and maybe chant something, and it doesn't have to make sense. I know some people are going to feel a bit silly doing that, but, you know, just think, oh, whatever, I'm just going to do it. Even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else but me, I'm just going to sit here and I've got this funny little chant in my head and I'm just going to offer that because it feels right. And you doesn't have to make sense to anybody else. So I'd encourage people to try that out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Rod with the thumbnail is asking,
that thumbnail.
Yeah. Do you think the fair has any connection to phenomena like UFOs and Bigfoot?
Yeah, I feel like the mechanisms are similar, and they also come from other worlds. So, yeah, there's some. I mean, some people believe that the aliens are, you know, this sort of updated form of what we believed fairies to be in the older folklore, and that might be true. For me, it doesn't feel like that personally, and I can't say whether that's right or wrong. I'm just saying how it feels to me. To me, they feel different, but as Rod points out, you know, the phenomena there's just huge crossovers. So yes, they're definitely tied in.
Go on, Paul.
But I'm just thinking, if there's a trickster element to it, and we're actively trying to connect and respectfully connect with these otherworldly beings, then why do you think we get the trickster element all of the time? Almost the deception. Why would that be, in your opinion?
Deception in terms of now you see me, now you don't, kind of thing.
Well, yeah, or keep us on our toes, and you know, just when you think you've got an handle on what's happening and what these things are, or what you can't predict. We know that what they're going to do, but they just totally go off in another direction. Something else happens to throw you. If they're trying to lead us, as I think Chris alluded to earlier, then why send us in different directions?
I mean, I think if you look back, you know, when you're a kid and you're learning about the world, if somebody just kind of tells you something, it's just a piece of information. You don't necessarily learn from it, do you? It's just a
That's the
piece of
point.
information, and you often forget it, and you might have to be told again. If you have an experience, there's a difference between knowing something and being aware of something. When you are reaching in your kind of exploration in your life and you have an experience, there's an opening, there's a sense of opening within us, and we're, you know, that's kind of expanding all the time. You can really feel that you're learning something, and that you might not be able to name it or describe it or know what it is, but there's something that makes you want to expand as a person, lean into those worlds, lean into your life. So I think it's a learning experience. And if we were just shown, we wouldn't believe it anyway. If we were told what the answers were, or we were told to go in that direction, it's not the same quality as actually discovering for ourselves. And so I think this is a process of discovery that is a very healthy process. And we're not used to it, because in this world, as I say, there's a sense of, like, you know, black and white, but these worlds challenge us to experience life and this world in a different way. So I think that we are kind of poked in that direction.
Andy from Studio 211 is asking, Jo, are your thoughts on the Fae that they are more spiritual, elemental, rather than being corporeal, or vice versa?
Yes, they do seem to be, I mean, compared to our bodies, our kind of dense, heavy, you know, vehicles that we're in this lifetime, they are different. But having said that, the being that I saw looked real. He wasn't kind of drifty, floaty, translucent, fuzzy around the edges. No, he was right there and looked as real as you and I. That's not to say that he was flesh and blood like we're flesh and blood. And he certainly was able to manipulate his presence in the material by disappearing, or at least I couldn't see him. Maybe he was still there, but I'd lost my sense of awareness with him. So yeah, I guess we're learning a lot more about, you know, what our own bodies are capable of, that they are, like everything else in this world, made up of tiny molecules vibrating at a certain level that make up, you know, chairs and houses and trees and bodies. So we have that etheric and you know, not physical, I can't think what the word would be, element to ourselves, energetic element to ourselves. So in that way we are like them, but we don't see ourselves in that way. We think of ourselves as kind of like, oh, this is where I end, you know, the outside of my body. But of course we don't. We our auras expand. Some people say maybe a meter or so from our bodies. Some people say they are infinite, and that's how we're kind of connected with each other in this world. I believe in the future we'll kind of learn more about that, really, but it's certainly seems that way to me.
Andrew's, well, I was calling him Andrew, but Studio 21, his question threw up, obviously the being that you saw became invisible, but there was a physical to it as it walked along the side of you.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think of Bigfoot as well, you know, they have a physical imprint on the earth, and yet, you know, so they're able to take effect on the earth. And another example of that is in that werewolf experience, which is called Guardian on the Mountain, or Guardian of the Mountain. It's a really interesting episode. The guy was Spanish. It took place on a mountain in Spain. In that experience, this being appeared on the mountain as they walked down the mountain. This is at night time, and it was an otherworldly being for sure.
Yeah.
But it was able to move through the stone walls and go round and round in a kind of diabolical fashion, round and round and round and back, and coming back to them again and round and back to them again, kept repeating this pattern. So not only was it able to move through the stone walls, but it had an effect on the bushes on the mountain. So as it ran past the bushes, yeah. So, it's having an effect on the physical, and yet it doesn't obey the same laws as the physical.
No, it didn't just
like
a cartoon. It didn't just run into a wall and bounce off it. It just literally almost evaporated through it. Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, it is fascinating.
And paranormal visitors, Chris, question to all.
Lee. He's saying, if the fae resided at Danesdyke or anywhere for that matter, do you think they're mad that human beings put roads and build on these things, on these sacred places?
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it, that people just... Yeah, I mean, in Ireland, people know about the fairy paths. If you've got a fairy path going through your property, you do not put an extension on your property. If you've been silly enough to build a property through a fairy path, you know about it, because all sorts of things go on in houses. And I speak to people over here as well, who have awful trouble with, and in America, awful trouble with their properties, and it's because it's been built on, where the fairies pass by. Whatever you think about that, whether that's an energetic flow in the landscape. So yes, we really, and in our society, well, in the UK, the local council are not going to listen to you if you try and tell them that. However, in Ireland, as we've seen, when people have tried to remove Hawthorne's fairy tree, to put roads through and to build developments and all these sorts of things, the councils do listen, because they know, thankfully, they've held on to that. And where people have ridden roughshod over that and done it anyway, they've lost their lives. People have lost their lives. Whether it be the developers or the builders or whoever took down the tree.
Go on, Paul. Do you want to add something?
I was just thinking, do you think unknowingly some people could have built properties and extensions on their properties, and that could be the result of strange activity occurring in homes? Yeah,
that absolutely.
They've not done anything knowingly, but they've just built on what we would call sacred earth, or earth that's sort of, I don't know, these beings use.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. And then it's hard for these people to admit that they're going to have to do something about it, because to admit that would be to admit there's part of them that believes in that, and then that would just kind of blow their mind, and where are they after that? So, but yeah, it certainly does happen.
Yeah. Thank you.
Steve Collins asking, Jo, have you ever been to Pat Noon's farm in Ireland?
I would love to go to Pat's farm. I first spoke to Pat in 2016, I think it was. And I was talking to him then about, what the work that he was doing on his land over there. For people that don't know, he's known as the fairy farmer. Is he in Meath? I have a feeling he's in Meath, but I'm not sure about that. In Ireland. And he had a fairy fort on his land. Some of the farmers, and he's a dairy farmer, some of the farmers that live around near him, let's go take some water for a second. Some of the farmers that live near him had knocked down their fairy forts so that they could just have more land for grazing, and they had things happen, like the cows had got ill and they'd gone out of business, or members of their family had become ill, and all this kind of thing. And Pat, who knows about the sacredness of these places, goes about and educates other farmers on these matters. And he goes and he'll kind of rebalance the land in places where mistakes have been made and try and bring back some, reparation between humans and the fairy beings. And you can go and stay on Pat's land. You can go and camp on it, and lots of people have had amazing experiences there. And I really want to go. And I spoke to him about 6 months ago, I think it was, and that's on YouTube if people want to go and check it out. He's a really lovely, very interesting guy, and I am going to make it over there. I think, Paul, I need to take a leaf out of your book, because I spend so much of my time behind the desk, and going forward I'm going to be going out and doing more, speaking to people, because your body suffers, doesn't it, when
it really does. And I just love being out, and I know Chris does. Sometimes work and life dictate that you can't, but I've had some years like that now, but I'm definitely planning to get out more. So that will be one of my trips, to go over and see him. Fabulous. We're hoping to get to Ben MacDoo this year. I don't know whether we will, Chris, but we're hoping to get up there, aren't we?
I think we just got to. Often you say, I'm too busy, we can't find the time. You can make the time. You just have to you need the inclination. It's like anything else.
Okay.
Joe, is that the wicker star you wear around your neck?
So this is my pentacle, but I don't kind of refer to it as Wicca personally. I don't really align with any specific sort of faith or way in which to see the world. But I've had this actually since I started working with my lovely group in Jersey, and the man that I met. He was the guy that worked in the antique shop, and sort of started asking him about what had happened to me, and so it's a precious piece of jewelry to me, and obviously it's very symbolic, and I see it as a protection symbol too. Okay. And it's just meaningful to me, but I wouldn't see myself as Wicca. Wiccan.
Rod, what is the significance of accepting a drink from the fair?
Oh, well, we hear a lot about this. So accepting food or drink is a huge taboo in anything to do with fairies. So it is not advisable, because once you take a sip, then the idea is that you then are kind of locked in with their other world. So you should always refuse food or drink from the Fae. So I've spoken to people. There's an episode called A Series of English Encounters, and a guy who's a friend of mine, actually, he was walking up Glastonbury Tor on Samhain, which we often know better as Halloween. And he bumped into a group of women who were dressed strangely, he said, and they offered him, I think they were oat cakes or something. They offered him something to eat, and he refused. Rightly so, because once you have tasted food, you can never return to the human realm. And so this is all in the folklore, and it's probably wise to adhere to that rule.
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking, Paul, did Joe, I don't suppose you've seen the film Paul and I made called Bringing Down the Light?
I haven't.
No, it went onto a streaming platform, so not everybody got to see it, but there is some amazing footage there.
I was thinking about it earlier. I'm glad you've touched on it before we close this down.
Do you want me to see if I can find it? I think I do have it.
Do. Yeah.
Oh, yes, please.
Just to see Joe's thoughts on it.
Basically, what it involved is a friend of ours, and he doesn't live far from me, probably about 3 miles away, and he's a good friend of Linny's who's in chat. Andrew, they call him, and and Andrew and his wife Kathy, and they've got a beautiful garden, and he's really in touch with the earth. And he's made his own standing stones in the garden, and made them with kind of love and reverence. And he's a craftsman, is Andrew. He turned his hand to anything, and he's made a door that almost looks like a church door, big arched door that's 2.5-inch thick, made of oak with studs on it. It looks brilliant in this arch. And he takes hold of his grandson, not with any inkling that he's going to see the Fae. I'm hoping Chris can find this, and he knocks on the door. He's got this bit of film, and he let me and Chris use it. And he says, "Shall we see if the fairies are in?" And literally, he's got the grandson in his arms. And as he does this little, what would you call it, Chris? I hope you find the footage, because
I've got it. I'll find it.
And this little being, or this little, people might say, "Oh, that's an insect," but it looks to have arms and legs, and it just literally flits into view. If that's all it is, then it's an incredible coincidence. And especially with Andrew, because he's so in touch with the land and so sort of spiritual himself, that you would imagine that if anybody was going to have something like this on his land, it would be him. But there's a farm in North Yorkshire, well, just on the outskirts of eastern North Yorkshire, and I've not been to this piece of land. It's not that nobody doesn't want me to go, but they're so protective of this there's a little triangle of land between two fields that's fenced off.
Oh.
I know that it exists. I know because Steve, a good friend of mine, Steve Ashbridge, and he's not seen anything, but apparently the Fae are there. People, the local landowner believes they're there, and he's kept it separate from the fields and just let it do what it wants. It's only a tiny triangle of land. Then at Warren Percy, which is near a medieval village between East and North Yorkshire, there's the fairy stones. There's lots of connotations to fairies and references, as you know, Joe, around this area. And I'm rambling because I'm hoping Chris is going to find this footage.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find it.
Well, we should have looked for that earlier. And I'll be honest with you, I was going to say to you, tell Joe about Andrew's not sighting experience with what he perceived as the fairy, but he's seen all sorts of things on his land. He's got a huge natural pond at the bottom of the garden. There's about an acre of land.
Lovely. Wow.
Yeah, and he went out one day, and we're jumping away from the Fae, really. He said, and I looked into the pond, and there was a little face looking up at me from under the water. A face. Just a face.
Yeah.
And he said, I watched it just flitter away, and it went into the mud. He says, I looked for ages and ages. He says it weren't a misidentification. He's adamant that's what it was. He's an intelligent guy.
Yeah,
not that people who, let's say, aren't academics, who aren't as intelligent, don't genuinely have these experiences. I don't think it discriminates. But, Andrew's stories are amazing. And I don't think you're going to find this, Chris, are you?
Yeah, I've got it.
You've got it. I think I remember you showing me that a long time ago, Paul. But I haven't seen it for a long time. So, or maybe you just showed me a photo. Maybe I haven't seen the film.
No, you may have seen the footage, but let's have a look now. Then, Chris, go on. They're just uploading that now.
Yeah, bear with me.
It's okay. So,
well, maybe Paul, as part of my venturing out, I'll come up and we can go for a walkabout and see what we can see. And if Andrew wants to me to come along there as well with you, then that would be lovely to feel into it.
It'd be lovely to go to the burial mound of Willie Howe, where Steve Collin and Joe's in the chat now. Steve had an experience on Willie Howe a few months ago, and I went and interviewed him about it. That was interesting, and he heard noises and sounds below the burial mound. Here we go.
Wow. Yeah, cool.
So
this is about as big as it gets, but it's bizarre.
Oh yes. Wow, isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I mean, and he's actually saying the words.
I love that. It's just absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I mean, I know nothing about fairy film and say film and photos. I know that in our group, we've kind of chatted about it, and one theory is that the things that look like that show up on Ring cameras and stuff can be St. Mark's flies, which do take that. Have you heard that before as well?
Yeah, and you can actually think you can see limbs, and in many cases that's
I
probably
know
it is. Yeah,
it is amazing. I think what I would say to Andrew is, how did it feel like when it happened? Because I think when there's one thing seeing something. I think when you're seeing something, when you'll get a sense of the presence, even if you didn't see it at the time.
Yeah.
How did it feel to you? Because that for me is always the
marker
clincher.
For the original. Yeah.
Exactly. How did it feel? As for me, speaking to people about their experiences, it's usually they're seeing something with the naked eye. But I have to say as well that he's opening a door to the other realm, and at that moment, even if it is a St. Mark's fly, for that to come in at that moment, it's a bit like me with the TV and the voice. You're getting an immediate response, and so I think that in itself is, even if it is not a fairy, and I don't know whether it is or not, it might be, but even if it isn't, that is a direct message. I feel a very clear contact with, and if he's seeing what he saw in the water as well, that's really interesting, because it sounds like that whole place is alive with these
he
beings.
definitely saw that in the water, and I mean, Chris knows him. He's a good friend of Linny who was in chat, and the guy's genuine. He's really genuine, kind of honest to goodness kind of man.
Yeah, often it's the wider context, isn't it? There's a lot like Jo mentioned there about Andy's got so many experiences, and it's not just in where he is now, it's obviously in his life as well as, so there's all sorts going on. So it's just a beautiful garden, a beautiful place, and that's why he said he wanted to build the garden for that purpose. So so lovely. And he's teaching his little grandchild about that too, and that is priceless, isn't it? Because
it really is.
We need to encourage our kids to to lean into that. I feel that's lovely. Thanks for sharing that.
You're welcome, Jo. And Karen, thank you. And
thanks, Karen. Really appreciate that.
Do you know, Jo, we've not even touched on half of the questions, so apologies for not getting the questions out to everyone. We've not touched on the Green Man, and I wanted to talk about it. I know you did, but it's been a pleasure talking to you. It really is, Jo, and I do hope you get up this way and bring Rick up with you as well, because it's strange that we had a mutual friend. I couldn't believe it when I looked at photographs and saw Rick on photographs.
I know. Well, that was because of the Willerton. That was because of the Willerton gnomes, and he was somebody that I spoke to. So yeah, I really should. I'd released that interview with him just on Patreon, but maybe I'll release it on YouTube now, because that was a couple of years ago. Because I did a lovely interview with him, and he's a thoroughly nice guy.
Brilliant.
So yes, that would be fab.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's been a pleasure, and I'm going to say good night. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you so much, Paul and Chris. It's been really lovely being with you, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the time's gone so quickly. So speak to you again. All the best, and thanks to everybody for tuning in. So.
Okay, thanks guys, and we shall see you guys next week when we're going to be speaking to Mark Ollie. So we'll see you then.